I was on the London Underground heading into Zone 1. That stale metal smell in the carriage and someone's wet umbrella steaming gently in the corner. Across from me, a big Midwestern dad in a flag t-shirt was squinting at the contactless logo above the door, while his Oyster card dangled uselessly from his wrist on a souvenir lanyard. He finally announced, loud enough for half the carriage to hear, "You guys should just accept dollars. It would fix your whole system." A woman tried very politely to explain contactless local currency and that the tube is not a mall kiosk. At my age, you learn there's no quieter place on earth than a British train full of people pretending that sentence never happened. A guide I know in Berlin told me about a couple he took to the East Side Gallery on a gray March afternoon, concrete still sweating a bit from last night's rain. They stared at the painted remains of the wall, took a few photos. Then the husband unfolded one of those free hotel maps and frowned. After a long pause, he came out with, "So is this the border with Russia, or is that like somewhere else?" My friend gently walked them through Germany, Poland, several thousand kilometers, and the whole Cold War. He said the murals didn't bother him. It was watching someone try to restart geography from scratch at age 50. I was in Rome, cutting through the crowds around the Colosseum, that mix of car exhaust and old stone dust hanging in the air. A guy in a golf polo and spotless white sneakers was standing at the railing, looking down at 2,000 years of broken seats and missing floor like a disappointed building inspector. He pointed with his iced coffee and said, "When are they going to fix this stadium up to code and start using it again?" The guide next to him took a breath that probably added another ring to the history of Rome before explaining earthquakes, emperors, and the tiny detail that nobody wants live lions anymore. I just watched a man try to apply modern safety regulations to a place that used to solve crowd control with actual gladiators. A French coworker told me about a couple she served years ago at a cafe just off the Seine. Quiet morning, clink of cups, smell of burnt sugar from creme brulee in the back. They were staring at the Eiffel Tower in the distance like it was a new franchise that had just opened. The husband leaned over his cappuccino and said, "I always forget. Did America build that for you after the war or before?" She explained very calmly that France actually built its own tower in the 1880s and that the Statue of Liberty was the gift, not the other way around. Apparently, the man nodded like he'd just cleared up a minor shipping confusion. Not 140 years of history. In Barcelona, I was nursing a beer at a little tapas place in Elborn late evening when the locals are just starting to think about dinner, and most Americans are already in bed. A sunburned guy in a baseball cap came in at 5 on the dot, sat down, and stared at the menu like it was a personal insult that nothing said combo. After a minute, he told the waiter, "If you guys served normal dinner at 5 p.m., tourism would absolutely explode." The waiter explained gently that in Spain, eating at 5 is what you do if something terrible has happened and you're stress snacking. I took a sip of my beer and watched a man try to fix a country by moving its entire circadian rhythm up 3 hours. A bike mechanic I know in Amsterdam was standing outside his shop near a busy intersection, drizzle in the air, the bell tones from passing trams layering over each other. He watched this couple wander straight into the bright red bike lane, arms spread, taking selfies with the canals behind them. Cyclists were swerving around them like a school of annoyed fish until the guy finally shouted without moving an inch, "These red sidewalks are so cute, they really make the city pop." The mechanic walked over and, as calmly as you can in Dutch, explained that those cute sidewalks are where several hundred kilos of metal and human will pass every minute. He said it's always the same look when they step back onto the gray pavement and realize they've just survived a level of city planning they didn't know existed. I was on Santorini one evening, wind coming off the water, and that mix of incense and sea salt around one of the blue dome churches. There was a small sign asking for quiet and modest clothing. Nothing dramatic, just basic respect. A guy in a sleeveless tank and flip-flops walked up to the doorway, peeked in at the icons and candles, and then turned to his wife and said, "Back home, our churches have aircon and parking. You guys should really upgrade the whole experience." The old priest at the door just smiled and gestured to the view over the caldera. Like that was his only response. I've never seen someone look so offended that a building chose eternity over a climate-controlled gift shop. A Swiss conductor on one of those scenic trains up near Lucerne told me about a group he had in the designated quiet carriage. Big picture windows, cowbells in the distance, whole postcard thing going on. Everyone was sitting in peaceful silence, watching the mountains slide by, until one American dad fired up a video call on speaker. He panned the phone around and then said, "If this is first class, why is everyone so uptight and quiet?" The conductor walked over, pointed at the giant "Silence Roof" sign, and explained that some people pay extra specifically to not hear someone's family reunion at full volume. According to him, the dad sulked all the way up the mountain, like Switzerland had personally declined his application for audio dominance. I was in Stockholm during midsummer, long light that messes with your sense of time, so you're never quite sure if it's 6 p.m. or midnight. In a little waterfront shop, a guy in cargo shorts was trying to pay for a bundle of Swedish souvenirs with a fistful of American cash, like he was at a county fair back home. The cashier politely told him they only take cards and kroner, at which point he barked, "You're telling me the dollar isn't good here? That's wild." She explained exchange rates, different currencies, and that Sweden hasn't used the krona as a decorative suggestion. I just watched a man discover that money is not a personality trait with universal jurisdiction. An Irish bartender friend in Dublin told me about a night in a proper old pub, low ceiling, sticky floor, trad music, fighting with the sound of the taps. An American couple sat down, listened to 2 minutes of the local accent around them, and opened the menu. After squinting for a bit, the husband looked up and said, "Do you guys have a menu in normal English, like on Netflix?" The bartender informed him very gently that he was currently reading English and that what he was hearing was also English, just from a place older than his entire country. Apparently, the man nodded like he was being very tolerant about someone's little language experiment. I was in Vienna one night, standing in the cheap standing section at the opera, that heavy red velvet smell, and the orchestra tuning up under the chandelier. Right behind me, a guy in a blazer that still had the store creases was scrolling his phone, clearly shocked the show hadn't ended after an hour. During the second intermission, he muttered to his friend, "In the States, we'd cut this to 90 minutes and add popcorn. You're leaving money on the table." The older woman next to him turned and, in perfect English, explained that opera existed before his profit margins and would probably survive them. I don't think I've ever seen someone look so confused that a whole building refused to pivot to his business plan. A tram driver in Lisbon once told me about a family who got on the old yellow 28 line, the one that rattles through the steep streets past all the tiled facades and laundry. They settled in, looked at the little Tasca menus out the window, and the dad frowned at all the grilled sardines and bacalhau boards outside. After a while, he asked the driver, "So, do you have just a plain cheese pizza instead of all this fish stuff?" The driver explained that Portugal does in fact enjoy food that touches the ocean, and that the tram is not a delivery service for his comfort zone. According to him, the guy rode an entire historic line through a city of cod just to stay emotionally loyal to frozen pizza. I was in Norway on a fjord hike, air so clean it almost felt fake. That mix of pine and cold rock trail marked with those little red T's on stones. Halfway up on a perfectly normal incline, a guy in a college football hoodie had stopped dead, huffing like the mountain had personally betrayed him. He looked up at the rest of the climb and said to nobody in particular, "A proper country would have put an escalator up this mountain by now." A local passing by just smiled and kept walking, like he'd heard the weather complain about being too natural. I realize some people don't actually want nature. They want a shopping mall with better scenery. A guide in Istanbul, on the European side near the Galata Bridge, told me about a couple. He walked past the cats, the fishermen, and the call to prayer echoing over the Bosphorus. They were looking at the skyline, confused, like their mental image of Europe had taken a wrong turn. The husband finally pointed at the water and asked, "If this is Europe, where are all the desert camels?" The guide spent the next 5 minutes explaining continents, empires, and the difference between postcards and geography. He swears the man walked away still half convinced someone had forgotten to put sand and pyramids on the Turkish side of town. I was in Sydney on a summer afternoon, the kind where the UV index feels like it's personally auditioning to erase your skin, smell of sunscreen, and hot asphalt fighting each other near Bondi. A guy had just stepped off the plane, still in jeans and a dark t-shirt, already pink across the nose after 15 minutes. He stared at the weather app on his phone, then at the sky, and finally announced, "The sun should not be allowed to feel like this. You guys need a regulation or something." The local next to him suggested very kindly that the regulation was called sunscreen, long sleeves, and not pretending December is winter everywhere on Earth. At my age, I've learned that you can explain hemispheres, but you can't convince a man that the sun doesn't care about his home address.